Thank you, but I really am enjoying this session. So I'm going to, as we're coming towards the end on Friday afternoon, I'm going to talk to you about SMEs. I'm going to present to you some numbers and some animals.
Can you step onto the slides?
Sorry? And yeah, but they're very simple slides, okay? I'm going to talk about some numbers. So these numbers here, I'm representing Chris Eukins, okay? So I'm trying to talk about the US as well as the EU experience from my limited knowledge, okay? This number here, that's the number of businesses in the US that are classed as SMEs, 99.97%. This is the equivalent number in the EU, 99.8%. Now, they classify SMEs differently. In the federal system, in the US, these are much bigger businesses than in the UK, but basically in the EU. But basically, those are the numbers for SMEs. Now, I'm a simple lawyer, don't do numbers, so I'm going to round that up, because I don't think it's a big step. 100% of businesses are SMEs. So the first thing is to say, I'm pro-SMEs, actually just means I'm pro-business. Well, I hope we're pro-business, because we're all in public procurement. It is business. So I'm never very pleased to hear people say I'm pro-SME, because I can't imagine saying anything else. The next number I want to talk about is this, 18%. Now, some figures from the EU, and I'm being very free and loose with these figures, but broadly speaking, and these are from the Commission, I think, indicate that proportionally SMEs are 18% underrepresented in public procurement, okay? But if you drill into that figure, medium-sized enterprises, no matter how you define medium, it's slightly different from case to case, are only 2% underperforming. Small enterprises are 11%. No, sorry, get this right. Small enterprises are 5% underperforming, and micro enterprises, so those under 10, are 11% underperforming. So actually, if we're worried about underperformance and underparticipation, medium-sized businesses are pretty well doing okay. It's the small and the micro. And the question comes, how easy is it to have those much smaller businesses participating in government procurement? So when we're thinking about trying to improve the performance, we've got to think about measures that suit the really small ones. I don't know, Ricardo, how your SMEs are in your section, but some of them may be the medium size and need less support than the smaller ones. And this is something that Ricardo has mentioned, these numbers. These numbers are the sort of typical payment terms you see from governments. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, even 180 days. Well, even at today's interest rates, financing what is effectively an unsecured loan to the central government, to ask that of an SME, I think is completely inappropriate. We can put in all sorts of measures, but if we don't pay him on time, exactly as Ricardo was saying, that's disgraceful. It really is, and it really undermines everything else that we're doing. And in fact, the same people that gave the statistics I quoted a moment ago say that when they surveyed their people, they said that between the SMEs, the cost of doing business with the government for them, they reckon, is between 10 and 50% higher than an equivalent contract in the private sector. So they'd make more profit in the private sector. So we've got to address those sorts of numbers. This number 4, some of you may recognise, that's the number of hours it takes to get paid in the Korean online e-procurement system. Not days, hours. Instant. That's what we should be aiming at.
Well, even days.
Well, even days would be a start. Yeah, it would be a start.
Okay.
Now, this is where I'm going to part company, I expect, with some people in the room. This number was estimated by a chap called Story here in the UK. This is £8 billion. It's actually, I've rounded it up again. It was 7.9 billion. That's what he thinks is the cost in the UK of financial support to SMEs. £8 billion. That's more than the universities get. It's more than the whole of the police get. It's more than the fire service get. It is a very, very costly amount. Now, of the types of things that Ricardo was talking about, there are two types of supports to SMEs. The first type is more or less cost-free to the procurement system. Simplifying procedures, having standard documents so you don't have to keep learning and doing all those sorts of things. Those sorts of what I'll call supply-side measures are fantastic because they don't cost too much and they disproportionately favour those smaller companies for whom these costs are very high. So I don't suppose that much is in this figure of those sorts of measures. There's some investment costs, but those are really great measures. Paying people earlier, that may have a slightly more significant impact. But that's the sorts of measures that I think everybody can say, this is a good idea. These measures sort of work. This figure, 25%, is the UK's target for SME participation in public procurement. I don't know how far it's doing. I'm sure I could find that out if I looked a little hard, but I haven't seen any figures yet. And that's the goal for the US increase in set-asides. Now, the US currently has a 23% formal set-aside for the Federal Small Business Administration. So 23% of US government contracts at the federal level are reserved for SMEs. SMEs are basically medium-sized enterprises and upwards for us in many ways in that system. And there's also subsets for minority groups, women, veterans, people with historical disadvantages and so on. And so this 23% is subcategorised. And the costs of running that programme, because you've got to check, is everybody qualified, I wouldn't be surprised, are quite significant in their equivalent of 8 billion. So these costs of those types of programmes, set-asides and preferences, that's what this 8 billion is all about.
Is that in the UK?
That's in the UK.
I don't see where that, I don't understand that.
It's a figure from Story. I'll give you the reference because I've just used the figure, okay? And that's total SME support, not just procurement, but total SME support. Yeah, I'll give you the reference. This number here, well, there should be a number here. It's question mark. We have absolutely no idea what the benefits might be, the economic benefits of our support for SMEs. So this number, I mean, may be plucked out of a hat, I'm not sure. But it's a huge number, and we don't know what we're getting. I think that's a real pity. And I'll tell you why I think that's a real pity. Here we come to the animals. Now, those of you who are as old as me may recognise Kermit. He's a Muppet. But Muppets, for me, are not Kermit and his friends. They are economically marginal, undersized, poorly performing enterprises. Okay? Those are Muppets. The other side, we've got gazelles. And these are wonderful, wonderful, young, innovative companies where growth may come from, because they leap around all over the place, like a lot of the entrepreneurs who've been exhibiting here this week, maybe some of Ricardo's SMEs and so on. So if we're spending £8 billion in the EU, or in the UK, and we want to encourage innovation, I'd like it all to be going on the gazelles rather than the Muppets. And a lot of businesses that are small businesses want to stay small businesses because that's where they're comfortable. They don't want to sell to the government. So why is our taxpayers' money heading over here if it doesn't need to be? Because if we give it to them, we can't give it to them. And they're the people who might be generating the great economic growth. Now, is anybody, and I've just got to read something to you, is anybody actually looking into that? I've not found anybody at all. And I suspect one of the reasons is because SME policies make very good politics, okay? I would wish that we could make a little bit more effort in identifying these these gazelles. Because all of the things that we've said today, imagine what they could do if we really supported them. And I hope that we're going to hear from Gareth, for example, about some of the gazelles around here that are really being supported. I'm just going to read you a couple of quotations from some people called Nightingale and Code, because in case you think I'm creative enough to have thought up these things by myself, I didn't. I've pinched them from Nightingale and Code. And what they said is that the value of entrepreneurs, some of whom will be wealth creating and so on, has become such a part of the cultural zeitgeist that to ask for evidence or even question the robustness of that evidence has become the height of political correctness. Okay? So we just don't want to ask that question. And I think that, as I say, is such a pity. And they went on to say they found something said by a chap called G.H. Evans in 1949. And he said, "He who makes the desert bloom is often a very colourful person." A study of him, in consequence, is likely to turn into a romantic product. Cold-blooded appraisals of the role of the entrepreneur in economic development are rare. Glorification is usual. Now, having listened to what's going on in the EU, I think the approach that's being taken is heading us off in the right direction. It's not dictating what the SMEs should be doing, it's allowing the SMEs to compete. And that means if we do that and encourage them to compete, we should focus more on these gazelles than the Muppets. And so I hope that that will carry on. I think it's a great innovation and it needs a lot of support, and it will have mine, provided somebody looks into some of those figures that I have seen they haven't done so far. Thank you very much.